How's it going, guys? It's your boy Random Tall Guy. Welcome back to the Random Tall Guy channel. Today we're once again working on the XJ, and today we're gonna do something really annoying, something that I knew was gonna happen. I just wish it didn't. Let me show you what's going on. All right, guys. So we're in the XJ, and right now we have a check engine light. Honestly, I thought this was something pathetic, something small like a dirty sensor or something got unplugged, but I ran the code and I had a misfire on cylinder number 4. I ran a compression test, cylinder number 1, number 2, number 5, number 6, perfectly fine. There's cylinder number 3 and cylinder number 4, the reading was 60 psi, which is pretty low. I mean, I'm surprised how the engine didn't install at this point. So either I had a bad head gasket or I had the notorious cracked head. And this car is a 2000 Jeep Cherokee, and I believe I have a cracked head because this only happens on cylinder number 3 and number 4. So today we're gonna go ahead and replace the head. All right, so we're gonna start disassembling everything, but before we do anything, we want to disconnect the battery and drain all the fluid. So that includes the coolant and the oil. So we're gonna do that first, drain, remove the battery, drain the stuff, and then we can start unplugging stuff. All right, so I got the oil draining, I got the coolant draining. So as that's going, I'm gonna go ahead and start removing all the stuff on top of the manifold and on top of the head. So we're gonna go ahead and remove the air box, the hoses. We're gonna remove the throttle cables. We're gonna remove the fuel injectors. We're gonna remove any vacuum lines that it's gonna cross over all this area. Also, we have to remove, not really remove, but just unscrew the 2 bolts for the power steering and just move out of the way so we can access the bolts for the intake and the exhaust manifold. So let's get to it. All right, so far I removed the air box and also removed the throttle cable bracket. Now, make sure you put the bolts in a safe location and make sure that you kind of label them or kind of remember where they go, because all the bolts are different. For the throttle bracket, I'm just going to put the bolts right back where I got them from, since they're not going to really cause any problems if I leave them in. And also, it makes it easy for me to put everything back because the bolts are right there, so I don't have to go searching for them. All right, now we're going to go ahead and we're going to remove the the fuel rail. He's gonna remove the screws, pop it out, get it out of the way, unplug all the injectors, and also you also want to get all the electrical connectors here. You want to just disconnect them, put them to the side as well. You also want to disconnect the fuel line here. You probably need a special tool. I have it. It's just something that squeezes in here and basically unlocks it. You can push it to the side. All right, quick update, guys. I went ahead and I removed the fuel rail. I removed the 2 bolts that holds the power steering pump to the manifold. So this side is pretty much all set. You can leave this dangling. You don't really need to label. You don't really need to label any of these cables because they all go back a certain way, so you can't really mess that up. Same thing with all these connectors. The next step is we're going to remove this side now. This side, all we have to remove is the hoses, remove the thermostat housing, remove the coil packs, and remove these hoses. And also, I think that's pretty much it on this side. This side is the easiest part. We got the hardest part. Quick pro tip, as you're working around, go ahead and just start lubricating and spraying down all the bolts. It just makes it easier when it comes to removing it, because this one looks really baked. I might have to get a wire brush just to clean it out a little bit, because I feel like this is not going to come off easily at all. And same thing, just go ahead and just lubricate all the bolts that connects, that holds in the manifold. You want to make sure they're nice and soaked, so when it comes to taking them out, hopefully they come out nice and easy as well. There's about 30, I checked the specs on these bolts for the manifold. They're about 30 foot-pounds of torque, so they should be easy to come out. Now the heads are the difficult ones. That's like 100 foot-pounds of torque on each and every one of them. So take your time, go slow, just make sure you have everything memorized and where everything goes at the end. So we're gonna do this side now, so stay tuned. Alright guys, just a recap. So I managed to get the bolts out of here, the top right here, perfectly fine. Honestly, they were extremely rusted, but they came out perfectly fine. Now my issue is getting the last 3 bolts that are under here. I was able to take out one of them, because if you actually put your head down, you can actually see this one. But as for the rest, you're gonna have to feel for it. There's no way for you to see it at all. You're gonna have to feel for it. From some tips on YouTube, they told me this is the hardest part, is removing those bolts. Putting everything back together apparently is easier than disassembling it. So this is where I am right now. I'm gonna have to somehow figure out where the bolts are, remove them from there. Once I remove the intake manifolds, then there's another bolt behind here and here that holds the exhaust manifold, and then I should be able to remove both of them in one shot. All right, so let's get to it. Alright guys, I finally got the last bolt out for the intake manifold. I am so freaking happy. You can't believe it. To get the last 2 down here, a pro tip. This one right here, the 3rd bolt. If you actually get a extension, if you get the socket and extension, and kind of match it to this last, I will say, vacuum line here, and you actually trace it straight down, you'll get to the 3rd one. The 4th one, you definitely got to feel for it. There's no other way. You cannot see it, but it is pretty easy. Honestly, the 4th one was easier than the 3rd one. I do recommend, if you're gonna tackle this job, definitely have one of these swivels on your ratchet, because there's no way for you to take that out without that swivel, because you got the brake booster and you got this wall in the way here. So now this thing should come out in one piece, hopefully. There we go. Yep. There goes my tool. Make sure you don't break any of the. The vacuum lines, because they're expensive to replace. And there you go. Comes right off. Has a lot of poop on it, whatever. The intake is extremely light, just in case you guys want to know how heavy it is. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and hopefully I can get the last bolt. It's only 1 bolt. I already removed this one, but it looks like this is old. So I probably have to spray and get like a pliers or a screwdriver to pull it out. I'm just gonna get the last bolt down there, and then we'll see where we can go from there. Alright guys, another update. So I removed all the bolts. This thing is ready to come off, but for some reason This stud right here is preventing this whole exhaust manifold to come out. I'm gonna need to get some kind of special socket for this, because this is not a 12 point. This is some weird 6-point star looking thing. It's like a E-Torx or something. So I need to go to the store and get this. Other than that, this part is ready to come off. So on this side, the only thing you take off is the coils and the spark plugs, and also these 2 bolts that holds the bracket for the AC. I believe that's the only thing you have to take off. And then, yeah, that's the only thing you have to take off. I can see it right here. You take off these 2 bolts and this side should be all set. So I'm gonna go to the hardware store to get this socket for this side. I'll go, in the meantime, I'll take out these 2 and we should be ready to take off the valve covers and everything else. Go ahead and remove the bolts that holds the bridge, that holds the rockers and the push rods in, and all these components needs to go back in the exact same order it came out of. We cannot mess this up because they wear and they tear differently. So if we mix and match the rockers with the push rods, we might get some engine slapping noise, we might get some push rod noise, or we can damage the lifter. So I recommend just get a box, punch some holes on it so you can place the rockers and the push rods in the box, so you know exactly how the order goes. Alright, here comes the moment we've been waiting for. We can go ahead and remove the bolts for the head. There are about 14 bolts. All of them are 13mm 12 points bolts. I definitely recommend take your time with this. Don't go in any kind of rush. Use a breaker bar. Use WD-40. I'm not planning on reusing the head bolts. So once I take off the head bolts, I'm just going to dump them to the garbage or put them to the side. If you're going to reuse the head, I recommend loosening the bolts in the reverse process of the tightening sequence. In our case, we're going to replace the head, so it doesn't matter for us. We don't care if the head warps or anything like that, because we're going to replace it anyways. Once you got all the bolts removed, you can go ahead and remove the head. And also, if it's stuck like mine is, you can go ahead and put your hand inside the thermostat housing to give you like a bit more grip, so you can pull it out. Finally, the moment we've been waiting for. Let's see how dirty these cylinders are. I'm pretty excited. I'm extremely impressed how clean the engine looks. The light on the camera makes it look a bit dirty, but trust me, it's pretty damn clean. All she needs is a good spray down with brake cleaner. And even if you take a look at the bottom of the head where all the valve sits, it looks pretty damn clean. Barely any carbon buildup, and same with the intake and exhaust hose. You can see the benefit of keeping your engine healthy and clean by keeping up with the maintenance and oil changes. This engine definitely is going to last me 300,000 miles or more if I keep up with the maintenance. Alright, let's get back to the repair. Now we're going to go ahead and remove the head gasket. And if you take a look at cylinder number 3 and number 4, this big breakage in between them on the head gasket is the reason. So this was the cause of the misfire between cylinder number 3 and number 4, which also explained why I wasn't losing coolant or wasn't losing oil. Is because it happens in between cylinder 3 and 4. So maybe the head is in good condition, maybe it's not cracked, but since I already removed it, I'm gonna go ahead and put a new head. Alright, now it's time to remove the old head gasket material from the mating surface. The right side is almost perfectly clean. The left side though, we have a lot of big goo stuck to the engine, and this is where my oil leak was. I recommend take your time, use a proper tool to scrape it, use some like scotch pads and some WD-40. The material is really stuck and we don't want to go too aggressive because we can end up gouging the mating surface, and that can cause leaks and that can cause other issues. Alright, it's the next day and we can see right now we got a couple of shop towels and we soaked in WD-40 and we just laid it on top of the engine. Hopefully this helps weaken the gasket material so we can go ahead and remove it. Alright, and I recommend take your time with it. I recommend cleaning the whole surface, make sure you remove all the material. Alright, now it's time to put the new head in. This is a brand new head that I got from Ridgid, and it already came with the valves and springs, so I didn't have to do any of that sensitive installation. And I'm definitely going to leave a link in the description where you can get it, because I definitely recommend save your money, get the new head. Don't mess around with that old head anymore, just because if it snaps you need to do the whole process all over again. Now we can go ahead and we already cleaned the mating surface. We're gonna go ahead and put the new head gasket. Once again, I got this from Ridgid, and honestly this one is way better than the factory. Alright, and we got new bolts for the head as well, and we're just going to use this diagram to make sure we have all the correct bolts, because some of them are different than others. Some of them have studs, some of them are shorter. Alright, and just keep in mind that when we install the new head, we're going to make sure that the bolt number 14, which is all the way in the back right, we're going to go ahead and install that first, because once you put the head in, there's no way to get that bolt in. Now we're gonna go ahead and install the new head, and I recommend take your time with this. I find it best having someone stand on top of the car and just lower the head in perfectly straight down. You don't want to move the head back and forth as you're lowering it, because it might scratch the head gasket, and if you do any damage to the head gasket, that's gonna create a weak spot, which can lead to leaks, or it can lead to bad compression and all that. And the head is finally in. Remember to remove the tape from bolt number 14 so that we can go ahead and just lower that down. Now we're gonna go ahead and install all the bolts. I'll show you a diagram in a minute so you guys know or have an idea on where the bolt goes and what's the tightening sequence. For bolt number 11, this bolt in particular goes through a water jacket, so it's recommended by the manual that you go ahead and put some Teflon tape or some kind of water thread sealer on the threads. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. Alright, we got all the bolts installed. Now we can go ahead and make them flush. Alright guys, and this is how we're gonna tighten the bolts. We're gonna follow this sequence we got from the manual. If you notice, it says here we want to start from the middle and work our way out. There's a 4-step tightening process that we need to follow. So I'm just going to tell you how it is. We're going to first go ahead and tighten all the bolts, which is 1 to 14 to 22 foot-pounds. Then we're going to go ahead and torque all of them down to 45 foot-pounds. Once all of them are torqued down to 45 foot-pounds, we're going to go back. And we're going to go back to bolt number 1, and we're going to do another check and make sure that all the bolts are staying at 45 foot-pounds. Once you're done with that, this is where it gets a bit tricky. Now we're going to torque down bolt number 1 through 10 to 110 foot-pounds. Bolt number 11 is going to be torqued down to 100 foot-pounds. That is just bolt number 11. Bolt number 12
13 and 14 will be torqued down to 110 foot-pounds as well. Right now it's time to go ahead and install the push rods back, and we can go ahead and also put the rockers back in the bridge. As I said, you want to put them back exactly how you took them out because they wear down differently. So you might mess up your engine by changing parts or moving them around to different cylinders. Alright, now when tightening down the rockers, make sure you're tightening them down back and forth. So they come in pairs. You have a bridge that connects the two. You want to make sure you tighten one and then the other and then the other in that motion, back and forth until you tighten them down to 21 foot-pounds.
Alright, so we got the valve cover back on. I put new seals on all the bolt holes. So now we're gonna go ahead and connect everything back together. Now it's gonna be the reverse process. The easiest part is putting the exhaust back in. There's a trick to it I can show you, but we're gonna go ahead and put everything back together. Just a quick note, there's a sensor right here that has a stud. You want to make sure you remove the stud from the other head and put it in here, and then go ahead and put the sensor in. Just a tip. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and do the reverse process. I'm gonna put the bolt on the valve cover last, just because they're all over the place and I need to know which one goes where and all that. Alright guys, another update. I went ahead and put in the spark plugs. I put the 3 bolts that hold this bracket for the AC back. This side is pretty much done. All I have to do is put the coil packs on, and then we can move on to this side. So we're going to install a new gasket for the intake and exhaust manifold. Make sure that you put this stud here, and also on the other side, make sure you put in new studs. Remember, since it's a new block, it didn't come with these studs, so I need to buy them. I got them on AutoZone, so I got one here and one on the other side. For this, I recommend putting the head first and then putting the stud, just because it's a pain having these sticking out and hitting everything as you put the head in. Make sure that the exhaust manifold actually goes into those 2 studs, and I 100% recommend tighten the bolt that goes into this stud right here. I recommend not to tighten that 100%, you know, all the way, but tighten enough where it's nice and secure, and tighten this one nice and secure so this can stay in its place as you put the other bolt. Because as I said, there's no way for you to see this bolt, and there's no way for you to access it once the manifold goes on. You can probably feel it, but you can't really see what you're doing.
Now here's a trick to get the intake manifold in. Remember I mentioned that it's hard. The hardest part is to remove it. Easiest way is to put it back. Before installing the intake manifold, I recommend putting all the bottom bolts in first, just put them in and thread them like 2 threads. Keep them as loose as possible and make sure the washer is all the way out. What we're gonna do, we're gonna slip the intake manifold in between the washer and the head of the engine. And what that's gonna allow us to do is have the intake manifold in, and we can just go under the intake manifold and tighten the bolts. This is way easier than holding the manifold with one hand and finding the bolts with the other hand, because it's really impossible to do that unless you have like 5 hands working at one shop. So yeah, so what I recommend is keep the bolts and the thread out, put the sandwich in the intake, and then go ahead and tighten it. And just like the head of the engine, the intake and exhaust manifold also has a torque sequence that you need to follow. But apparently I've been advised that this type of torque sequence differs depending which model you have, because I know there's other Jeeps that had like that has the horseshoe intake manifold, and then there's another one that has some kind of like square intake manifold. So it differs depending which model you have. But in case you're wondering what I'm using, I put the diagram right here. Now this is the perfect time to put the bolts for the valve cover. So we're gonna go ahead and put it. Now I honestly forgot which bolt goes where, because some of them have studs, some of them don't. So I found this image on Google. Hopefully this helps you if you come across the same issue. Alright, once you got the bolts for the valve cover, you can go ahead and put the fuel rail and put all the injectors back and connectors and all that. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and install the thermostat and the thermostat housing, which is only 2 bolts. And we got a new gasket for that as well. And while we're at it, why not put the power steering pump back on? And don't forget to get the 2 bolts on the other side for the AC. Alright, and also don't forget to install the throttle body, and the kit came with a new gasket for that as well. And of course we can go ahead and put the air box back in as well.
Alright guys, quick update. I managed to put everything back together, well besides this part. Pretty much easy. I'm saying this is something I really don't have to teach you, because all these connectors all connect to one specific thing, so you can't really mess it up. I broke a vacuum line down here, which is not a problem. I ordered one on eBay. The other thing is this fan right here. I couldn't take the bolts out in the beginning, so I needed to break the plastic. Now I have to find a way to keep this on here. I was just thinking of putting some zip ties or just drilling a hole and just running another screw. What else? The power steering pump, the 2 of the bolts went in perfectly fine. One of them, for some reason, we don't know why, it was struggling to get in, but we got it in. Also make sure that you put all the vacuum lines here, there's 3 of them, make sure they go in. Make sure the ground cable down there is connected. I'm just gonna point out stuff that it's really small but you might forget. There's also I'm not sure if it's a temperature sensor or knock sensor that goes onto the head itself right here. Make sure that's connected. What else? Oh, and make sure that your sensors for the catalytic converter is connected as well. Alright, so I'm just gonna finish this up, then we're gonna go ahead and just put the coolant and the oil, and we're gonna start up. Hopefully it runs fine, and hopefully there's no weird noise, no knocking noise. I'm begging the engine to behave this time, please. All right, guys, and we're basically done at this point. I checked all the hoses. I taped off the little intake vacuum holes right here just because I'm waiting for this part to come in so I can replace it. So it should be fine. I checked all the connectors. I made sure there was no tools lying around. Now it's time to put the oil and coolant. We're gonna go ahead and put the oil first, and then once we get the engine starting up, we're gonna go ahead and put the coolant. Alright guys, the moment of truth. I went ahead and connected the battery. Let's go turn it on and see if it starts. Alright, we're gonna go ahead and turn it on. I'm really scared. Hopefully I done everything correctly. Hopefully I don't hear any kind of engine knock noise. Hopefully the lifters and the push rods and the rockers are all aligned. Alright, let's go start it up. Alright, that sounds good. Listen to that engine run. Everything's working now. I basically, at the beginning, there was a vacuum leak due to this vacuum hose snapping. So I got this generic air hose. It looks like it's doing the job. I also changed the elbows down here. There's some vacuum elbows that was cracked. I changed it, and the car looks like it's running beautiful now. It got me a bit scared in the beginning. I also noticed there was a spark plug. I don't know, it was weird. Either the spark plug was cracked or it was defective, because when I was looking below the coil pack, it was flashing. So I thought I had a bad coil. So I replaced the coil, and then when I put the coil in, it was still happening. So I replaced the spark plugs. Now the car's running beautiful. I'm so happy with it. I checked for leaks. There's no leaks. The engine's running fine, the lifters are fine, everything looks beautiful. Alright guys, the car's running beautiful now guys. It took 3 days for me to install the head, and honestly, anyone can do this in their garage at home. Honestly, this was not an easy repair, and I do not recommend this for beginners. But I definitely recommend anyone who's up for the challenge, definitely do it yourself. You save so much money because you don't have to pay labor. The labor is something like this. Labor can go anywhere from $1,000 to like $1,500. So it's definitely worth doing it yourself. I said it's easy. It's pretty easy. It just requires a lot of patience. And look at it. The car's running beautiful. I'm so happy with the results. If you like the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, guys. It definitely helps me understand, how good my videos are and what I should do differently. So don't forget to share and like, subscribe. I mean, the engine is beautiful. There's no spills. Everything looks dry. This is an amazing repair. So yeah, guys, catch you next time. See ya. Bye.